Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews, this being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Republic of Sarah. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This episode is actually kind of like the aftermath episode of the previous episode. It's kind of almost like a conclusion / epilogue to it in certain regards. Obviously, at Town Hall, you have like that Christmas party and celebration that's happening, which is super awkward for Corinne because it's like, oh yeah, me and Danny did it right over there, and then we spent the entire blizzard together. And then there's also the fact is we both had to lie about where we were during the blizzard. Then Adam pops up with like, oh, these skeleton lights could be the representation of Christmas past, and she's like, nope, because there's also the complicated thing of both of them are kind of lingering and holding on to it because both of them took one of the skeletons, and it's like, yeah, it was supposed to be like a let's forget this happened, but both of you are keeping a memento of that night, so that's not the best thing. And so the entire time Corinne's stressing about that, and what makes it worse is that Danny shows up with Piper because Piper is like, hey, I didn't want you to spend Christmas alone. In fact, I was actually going to be here sooner, but then like the blizzard happened, and it's like, oh god, just turn of events after domino effects of things going down. So she decides like, hey, I want to go to the thing, like the party, and like Danny's like, it's just kind of a small towny thing. She's like, but I want to do it, And so it's like, okay. So things are kind of awkward. They're all sitting at the table. Because what makes Corinne feel worse is when she finds out because the moment Paul goes over, he's like, yeah, I know you're from New York and everything. I'm finally getting to meet my son's fiance, but it's like, which he wasn't around in their life, so having that conversation is super inappropriate and super awkward to have around Corinne. Granted, it's been 6 years, but he wasn't around to know, like, oh yeah, Corinne was his ex-fiance. That's a whole complicated thing. But like, Corinne felt bad because it's like, oh, I'm the CFO of this like nonprofit where we I forgot what she was saying that they did, and just you could tell it makes Corinne feel bad because it's like, Danny's fiance Piper is actually a really good person, so it just makes her feel guilty. I mean, being around her son and her husband makes her feel, it's just like guilt-ridden. Even you can tell it's happening for Danny too, but obviously there's a complicated thing of he has feelings for Corinne too, so it just makes it kind of bad, especially it's like, oh, this woman's amazing. My son, you better marry her, marry her real quick, and it's just like, oh boy. And finally, through the stress of it all, Corinne finally opens up to Sarah about like, yeah, me and Danny, we had sex, and she regrets it so much. But it's like, Adam always puts a smile on her face and makes her happy. But at the same time, it's like, no one's ever made her feel the way Danny did. His smile makes her feel strong. And, that's why, like, the way that's why their relationship is complicated because of what they knit for each other. Like, she was Danny's safe haven, and then for her, it's like you kind of breathed life into me. You for the first time, I think with him back in town, it just felt a little suffocating, and I think for the first time in that moment, she was allowed to kind of finally breathe, and that's when they kind of did their thing last episode. So like I said, if it wasn't for the fact is that they're both in the situations, he's engaged, she's married. If it wasn't for that, there'd actually be a really sweet love story in that yeah, they fell apart, but then like maybe they found their way back to each other. But that's also a love story in its own right. Like, you decide who you want to be with. It shouldn't be like, oh no, like this is like, because I don't know if that would be considered like the fairy tale ending, them getting together or not. Because as Corinne brought up last episode, it'd be a massive like ripple effect. It hurt a lot of people, so we have to keep it hush hush. But it's still such a fresh enough thing. It's like, right, we're kind of like still having to stew in it. Because once again, it's not like you were either forgetting it either, because you both took mementos. So you taking mementos last episode made me think like, oh, that's sweet, but at the same time, I was like, it's a bad sign because you're supposed to both be trying to forget it like it didn't happen, but neither one of you are if you're both keeping the mementos of that whole excursion. And now Sarah's kind of in the middle, and Sarah's like, Adam, he's been this great guy. He's like, he's been there for you. So like, he's always been there to kind of support you. So stay with him, like, because obviously he loves you and you love him. And plus he's Josh's dad. And Corinne gets super quiet. I was like, whoa. And she's like, he is Josh's dad, right? And she's like, I don't know. Because the night Danny left, like sometime afterwards, Adam, like Sarah and them kind of invited her to a party, and she just wanted to kind of feel some form of affection. So her and Josh, and I said Josh, Adam, did their thing, and she found out she was pregnant with Josh like a month later. So she wanted it to be Adam. But she's never been sure. Like, I think because she willed it and wanted it so much, because it's like Danny's issues. Also, Danny's the guy that was going to be your fiance and abandoned you like out of nowhere without giving you any clues as to why that happened. Like, you were devastated, so of course you wouldn't want anything associated with Danny. Because I thrown that out there early, because Danny was kind of like, wait, is Josh mine? And Sarah immediately shut that down. So I was like, maybe he isn't. But then it's like, no, this kind of opens up that door again. I was like, woo, this is going to be complicated. But for Sarah, she's trying to handle it by being, no. Even, Danny, no. Regardless, biology or anything, if Adam is Josh's father, he always has been, always will be, stick with that. And she's like, okay. Which is also kind of messed up in its own right, because there's the whole situation of, well, first and foremost, Piper decides she wants to stick around in town because Greylock has become Danny's home. He's sticking here for work here, even on a city council. The fact is that it's like, right, like us being in New York, and you being here was fine when it was kind of, you being here was temporary, but now it's like the place he couldn't wait to get away from now is the place he wants to call home again, because because even Piper talks about it later on, like, it's like he's going through a lot of healing. She's like, I think he's been able to kind of contend with a lot of the past and kind of isn't been on his way to healing. And I think so. That's what makes the whole Corinne thing complicated too, because it's like, she now knows the reason why he left, and a lot of those reasons, those wounds, yeah, they're there, but they're not as deep as they used to be, because he's in the process of healing and recovering on a more personal level. So he's not, that's the thing, like, Danny's not the same person he was when he showed up in this town, because that Danny was the Danny that ran away 6 years ago because he just couldn't stand this town, because it was just a reminder of everything that his mother ever did to him. And so that's what makes this Sarah thing complicated, because Sarah's kind of stuck in the middle, and she's just like, oh, just give Danny some time. I'm sure, you guys will find a house that you both like. And she confronts Danny about what he did. And it's like, Piper, she loves you and everything. It's like, you being with Corinne is just nostalgia. That's not love. Now, I think there's a part of me that agrees with what Sarah did, but there's also a part of me that disagrees. Now, I agree because I think, like, Sarah's just trying to do the right thing. It's like, right, like, you guys are going to blow your whole lives up. Like, Corinne's life is going to be blown up. You weren't here in the aftermath of what you left. We all were. So, like, I'm trying to keep one of my best friends together and not let her fall apart again because of you. You came into town and you're kind of in a process of potentially throwing her life into disarray yet again. So it is a thing of like, maybe there is some part of like Danny of like, yeah, she felt safe. So when you're back with her, it's nostalgia. It's like, you both aren't the same people you were, but you're kind of falling back into that because of nostalgia. You haven't seen each other. You were kindling like that love for each other. Cause even, Grover was like, yeah, like, still having feelings for Danny, loving him, you can't help who you love. Like, that part's always going to be there, just like he's always going to love Patience. So there's that, but it's like, it's just kind of messy if you guys get involved, which ultimately they did, and it got super messy. Now, the part of me that I feel like I disagree with Sarah, like, yes, it's a super complicated thing, but it's also because Sarah is coming from the perspective of, I'm trying to fix things that, it's like the heart wants what the heart wants. Yes, it can be messy, but people are human, people are allowed to falter, and I just think she's just so quick to be like, oh, it's nostalgia, there's nothing to it. It's like, but you're not your brother. You don't know how he really feels. Like, how can you just allocate it to nostalgia? You want to just brush it off, but it's like, your brother loved her at one point in time. Like, who's to say those feelings aren't still there? Especially because he is a different person. And I think that's what she's also holding against him is like, right, she's just saying it's nostalgia because she made you feel safe despite, what mom put you through. But it's like, you abandoned her, but it's also like, right, he's not that person anymore. Like he's in a process of healing, like Piper said. And I think it's also the element of, right, your dad is around. So a lot of that, I think, abandonment, like that you associate with Danny, which the argument could be the reason why he did that too is not only because of his mom, but also like, that's what your dad did. When the going got tough on a personal level, he just left. Danny kind of did the same thing. So part of me was like wondering whether Sarah was kind of just projecting her issues of their dad onto Danny in this case, which they're applicable, but I still just feel like maybe, like I said, it's like, it makes me feel conflicted because like I see both sides of it. I can see where Sarah was coming from, but I also think like she could have like was a little like displacing a lot of that those harsh feelings. But, you know, once again, that's just my perspective. I'm not saying everyone would agree with that. Like, it's still a thing of like, yeah, it was an affair situation. That's kind of a big no-no. You don't cheat on someone, you don't break their heart. But it's like, humans make mistakes. There's a lot of mistakes. Like, a lot of people didn't handle things the way they should. But it's also like, humans are complicated. We're not so simple, you know? And so that's why I'm just like, I think I'm a little more lenient on Danny when it comes to that. Like, I was like, last episode, like, no. Well, even before last episode, the episode before last, when it was like happening at the very end of the episode, I was like, no, don't do it. Oh, this is going to get messy. So I already knew that, and I don't condone it, but like, I understand it from an emotional level to a certain extent. I'm not saying like cheating's okay. No. Because you hurt people by doing that, but it's also like I said, it's just like for the characters' perspectives, I understand like what led to that moment and potentially kind of empathize with what's in their hearts to some extent, or at the very least sympathize. So that was kind of an angle to this episode, and let's go ahead and keep down that path of like dealing with that too, of. You know, Sarah was saying, like, right, you have to make things right with Piper because here's a woman that loves you and stuck by you. So Danny took that to heart and he breaks things off with Piper because for him, it's like, you are a perfect person and you deserve someone that's perfect for you. And she's like, but that's you. Like, I love you. And he's like, I love you too, but just not the way you deserve, because he's like, he doesn't go into explaining like what happened, but ultimately he explains it later on to Corinne. It's like he loves someone else. It's like, how can I give my life to Piper when I'm in love with someone else? That's not fair to her, you know, because he's already been down this route of hurting someone he cared about, Corinne, and so he doesn't like. He'd rather hurt Piper now than let her waste her entire life like trying to build a life with him just for her to be even more like. He doesn't want what happened to Corinne. Like, he'd rather hurt her now in this way than hurt her much later on down the road like he did Corinne. Like, you know, so he's trying to do the right thing. Like, when I have love in my heart for someone else, and plus sides, I cheated on you without going into it, like, I need to end things here because this is the right thing to do. This is me doing right by you. Because he even says it himself, like, I'm a mess, because he's conflicted in his own feelings. He cares about Piper, but he also loves Corinne. So like with my heart being conflicted like that, like, I definitely can't marry you because that's not right for you. That's not right, which, you know, kind of sad. That day, but I think Danny made the right choice in that regard. Obviously, at the same time, Corinne has a paternity test sent to Sarah's house, but for Corinne, it's like, she needs to know, like, it's driving her crazy, because I think for so long she like deluded herself into believing like it has to be Adams, it has to be that now, like, everything with Danny popping, like reopening those wounds and feelings again makes her think maybe I just wanted it to be Adams so badly, but maybe there is a possibility it's Danny's. Josh is Danny's. And so she's like, even if I find out that the baby is Danny's, it doesn't matter. I keep saying it, like, he's not like a 6-year-old kid. Josh is, even if she finds out Josh is Danny, she's like, nothing's going to change. But Sarah's like, you're deluding yourself if you think that's the case. And she's like, I know, but it's just that I just need to know. And so ultimately the test results come up later on, and Sarah says that Josh is Adams, and it's like the look on her face, like, happy that everything worked out. But I'm like, because at first I was like, the way she was looking, I was like, is it because, was she just reading what she was like, focused on what she was reading? But it almost seemed like it's I was going to keep saying it. Josh is Danny's. It just felt like she was lying. But the fact is, like, normally, like, you know, your typical TV moment would have been like her smiling, and with Corinne like, oh, everything's okay, and then behind her back be frowning like, I'm doing this to protect you. Now, is there a strong possibility we still might find out she's lying? It's just like that look on her face, but I guess it's like she was just reading it. Maybe she was kind of nervous about what the results would be and what it all means. I don't know. But I think there's a possibility. It still could be like a small chance, but the fact that she was still smiling makes me think like, no, she was like happy because she was relieved to be like, nope, it definitely is Adams, you know? So that's where that comes into play. So that's currently where things stand. Sarah does talk to Danny about it later on, but, you know, like I said, Danny talked to Corinne and opened up to her. It's like, you know, what happened between me and Piper, it's just between us. But she's like, no, like, I'm involved in this. I need to know why. And he was like, because I was in love with someone else. And she's like, well, Danny, you should have never came back to town. not 100% his choice. He kind of made that choice, but it was more like a lightened choice, but still, his appearance was meant to soften the blow. But if he had his choice, he actually didn't want to stick around, but he found many different reasons to stick around because him and his sister have a better relationship. His dad's in town now. He has a lot of reasons to stick around. Because even Piper was like, oh, this town is toxic. You're right. Like, you want to break up. And it's just like, no, like, we should have never come back to this town. It's like, we can go back to New York. Everything can be fine. But that's the big thing. Like, it's an aspect that, like, nothing can be what it was before. And that's an aspect that ripples across the entire episode in that regard. Because obviously on one side of things, you have the whole complicated Bella situation. Because she goes to Alexis and confronts her. It's like, right, I know about AJ, but also, like, you know, she confided in me that you do love me. You love being my stepmom. And she's like, yeah, I do. Side note, it's been bugging me this entire time. I finally looked. I thought I remembered where it was, but let me shut up and say it. The actress who plays Alexis, she kept looking so familiar to me. I kept remembering what it was I knew her from, but kept forgetting. So I looked it up to remind myself, and it was Coroner. She was Kelly in season 2 of Coroner. I was like, that's what I know you from. Apparently, she was in October Faction, but I don't remember. Granted, it's been a while since I saw it. So, but the other thing I completely forgot that she was in was The Boys. She was Elena in The Boys. I completely forgot about that. Maeve's girlfriend. I had completely forgotten about that. I was like, holy crap, dude. I was like, I had completely forgotten. That's also, because the thing that I think was sticking out in my head was Coroner, because I think that was, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember which came out first. Season 2 of Coroner, at least here in the U.S. Did season 2 of Coroner come out first, or did The Boys? I don't remember. Maybe they were like roughly, I don't know, whatever the case may be. I don't think The Boys came to mind. I think The Coroner did, just because I associate the CW, you know, with another CW show. But regardless, I was like, holy crap, dude. I completely forgot you were Elena. I was like, yeah, I pictured in my head. I was like, yeah. Regardless, that was just, like I said, something floating in my mind for a while. And I kept forgetting to bring it up during these reviews. So now it's out there. But she apologizes to Bella, and it's like, right, like, no matter what our circumstances are, I will always love you. I will always be there for you if you let me. Because at first she's like, how could you do that, my dad? She's like, I am sorry. I made a lot of mistakes. And that's a big part of this, too. Like, this episode's filled with, like, you know, like I said, things not being the same, but also mistakes. So her dad's kind of falling apart. Like, William's like, okay, you need to come home. Right, you don't have to go to that boarding school anymore. Just come on, we can be a family. I don't want you near Alexis. Like, did she ask you to bring her stuff over there? He's like, yeah, I don't want you seeing her anymore. Which I immediately was like, honestly, William, that's super jacked up. Because it's like, you sent your daughter away in the first place, and now that you're going through your little turmoil, like, understand, I mean, not little, I'm not trying to minimize it. You're going through a divorce, you're heartbroken, sure, but it is kind of messed up. You're the one that pushed for your daughter to go to this, boarding school, and now that she did, and now you're going through what you're going through, it's like, oh, I need you home. It's like, that's super messed up. It's like, she begged you that she wanted to stay, and you made up your mind, and it's like, now you get to make up your mind again, and she gets to come home. Granted, she was happy that just even this small amount of time to spend with Tyler, and Maya get to spend time with her boyfriend, as well as her best friend. And obviously, like, Tyler and Maya are doing the whole, like, curling thing, and, like, Tyler's introducing her to, like, the winter sports type of stuff. And they're bonding and having fun with all of that. But her dad throwing that proposal out there made, you know, she talks to Maya about it. And it's like, honestly, going back to this school in Greylock, it's like, she would have, like, nah, like, I'm not that person anymore either. Like, because I was just a drone, so I don't want to go back to being that. But also, it means I get to spend more time with you and Tyler. So that's the big thing. She gets to be back here, because it also means, like, more time she gets to spend with Alexis and her dad, but Dad's not in the best spot, which, you know, Maya's like, yeah, I kind of had to, like, take care of my mom, and it wasn't always the easiest thing, but for her, at the end of the day, like, for Bella, it's like the freedom she had at the school wasn't the freedom she had in Greylock, because she got to pick her own classes and everything, so she got to feel freedom there. So the thing is, like, if she does come back, like, she's afraid of, like, she'll just kind of be stuck back, kind of a little back, rather, like, the growth she's had, like, she'll kind of be forced to kind of backpedal in that regard. But Maya, at the end of the day, is like, do what you whatever choice you make, me and Tyler have got your back. And that ends up being something she confides in Alexis about. And Alexis says, basically, learn from my mistakes, because I made a lot of mistakes. I should have been upfront with your dad about the reason why I cheated on him is because I wasn't getting what I needed emotionally. And it's like, if I had let him know like ahead of time, like, I don't know whether it's like a thing of like, hey, I'm actually discovering this thing about myself that I'm more into women. Because she'd even, like, Bella was joking, like, yeah, I don't think my dad would have been down for a throuple. Which I'm like, is that the new word for that? Like, I won't blast someone else's situation, but a celebrity situation came up fairly recently. It's been a while now. That was like, that's the first time I ever heard the word throuple. That I'm like, I didn't know there was. Is that a recent terminology? Is that term, like, being used in this episode supposed to be a reference to that celebrity situation, or has that always been a slang term for that I've just never been aware of? Because usually when it's like, because I always think threesome, but threesome's like them, like, the sex act. It's not necessarily like a threesome doesn't necessarily, I mean, at least I always assumed it did. I guess I didn't know there was a word for like a three-way couple. I mean, I thought it was just kind of like a, whatever the case may be. It's just, I wasn't expecting the word throuple. But, you know, Alexis was like, if I had been brave, like, maybe I wouldn't have hurt your dad. Like, we could have ended things, but at least they would have been amicable. But I basically ended, like, I complicated things and kind of set fires the way I did, which fires is a metaphor from a different conversation, which we'll get to later. But Alexis is like, you're braver than me. Like, if this is what you want, make sure it's what you want. Like, you're coming back not just for your dad's sake, but because that's what you want. You're definitely you are braver than me. So all you have to do is speak your mind, like, say what you really want, do what I couldn't do. You know, a lot of people ended up getting hurt because Alexis couldn't just be upfront with like William or AJ or anything. So, you know, things turned out the way they did. So, but she makes her deal with her dad. It's like, yeah, I will come back, but she lays some ground rules. Like, I am going to see Tyler whenever I want to because he makes me feel good and I love him. And also, I'm going to see Alexis, too, because she doesn't have to come over. You don't have to see her. But at the end of the day, like, she is the closest thing I've ever had to a mom in my life. So, is that a deal? And we see later on, he's sitting down, like, at dinner with Bella and Tyler. So, it's like, yeah, everything works out. She's back home. That's really sweet. So, I'm like, that's awesome. And then on the other side of things is the whole situation with Maya. Maya has actually been having a lot of fun, but that's also what kind of upsets her a little bit because, like, now it's like, oh, here I am having fun without my mom. My mom's in jail, and it's like, I don't want my mom thinking, like, my life is so much better without her. And so because of that, she hasn't been writing her mom. Like, in the beginning, when she first got to Greylock, she would write her, like, letters all the time. But now it's like she's actually having fun. Like, she actually loves being around her dad and everything. It's like him and all the, like, tons of Christmas jokes he's making. But, now it's like, here I am, like, what do I do? Like, if I tell my mom, like, things at Greylock suck, it's like, she's going to be worried about me. But then if I tell her everything's okay, it's like, look, Mom, look how great my life is without you. And look, interesting enough, who gives her advice? Paul. Which she's like, oh, you're Sarah's dad, like, the guy who abandoned his family. And he's like, yeah, speaking up from that experience. Parents, you know, sometimes, like, when we make mistakes, our biggest concern is, like, how they affect us ourselves. But as a parent, that plays out a little differently because then you start wondering, like, whether your mistakes end up burning your children and they have to suffer the consequences of your mistakes. And he says, you know, as someone who has made a lot of mistakes, your mom is, you know, as someone who's made a lot of mistakes himself, because it sounds like your mom has made some that end up in jail, but it's like, your mom will be happy knowing that how good you are doing without her, because like, those mistakes kind of stick with a parent where they're thinking like, oh man, like he's implying like her mom is probably stressing out, like, I want my baby to be okay. Like, I don't want her to have to suffer and drown because of my mistakes, but show her that you are okay. And now will make her feel better knowing that despite her mistakes, you're doing good, you're prospering, you know? And so Tyler, and because she couldn't come up with anything to say in her letter, but Tyler ends up giving her the photos, and she's like, yeah, he's like, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So she's able to send those pictures to her mom to show her mom, like, how much fun she's having, all the photos, like, Tyler took of her having fun, you know? That showing that she is okay. So I thought that was beautiful. And another angle to this episode is, obviously, they kind of show off early on that AJ's super into Christmas, obnoxiously so. But then Grover immediately goes, you know what? I know that's not the case because I look in your eyes and I see me. Like, this is like my second Christmas without patience, and I'm miserable and hate it. Like, the fact is all these people happy, and it's like when he looks at AJ, he sees her overcompensating, and it's because for AJ, it's like her dad was like all the Christmas stuff that was her dad's time, and now that he's sick, it just feels like, you know, nothing's ever going to be the same. And, you know, Grover decides, like, right, so let's do our, like, anti-Christmas thing. So we are the anti-Christmas Christmas Club. Because, yeah, things aren't ever going to be the same, but what we can do is set our own traditions. We're going to get, like, summer drinks, we're going to watch summer movies, and we're going to be, like, summer during Christmas. Like, we're going to be, like, when they're doing their Christmas thing, we're going to do our summer thing. Go watch summer movies and everything. And later on, Sarah and Danny join because, yeah, they've got their own issues with Christmas because it's like, yeah, the Coopers in general, like, Christmas rears its ugly head when it comes to all of this, but, because I think Sarah wasn't expecting things to kind of play out the way they are, and, you know, obviously seeing her brother as heartbroken about everything as he is, but I think, you know, that's when she's like, come with me, and I love the whole thing of, like, right, he's like, I'm dressed up like a Miami Vice villain, like one of the bad ones that get caught, you know, and they're watching Die Hard with a vengeance, but them kind of surrounding each other during that, like, anti-Christmas situation and celebrating together like that was actually pretty dope. I really liked that a lot, so... like I said, just a nice actual, like, conclusion / epilogue to kind of what was set up in the previous episode. I like how it kind of all, like, pays out. I mean, there still could be trickle effects from it later on, but we'll have to, you know, wait and see if there ends up being anything that comes about from that. But I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.